Disputes over restrictions on immigrants coming into the Netherlands grew so bitter they led to the downfall of the Dutch government. It also led Mark Rutte, the longest-serving Prime Minister in the Netherlands' history, to announce that he would not run for re-election. So, what divided the nation so severely? Welcome to Roundtable. I'm Philip Hampshire. The number of asylum applications in the Netherlands has grown so rapidly it's become a serious political issue. However, Mark Rutte's measures to stem the flow just proved too controversial, and they divided the ruling coalition until it fell apart.
The laws Mark Rutte proposed to reduce the number of asylum seekers aim to create a two-tier system. People fleeing persecution will be given more rights than those escaping war zones. It also aimed to reduce the number of relatives able to reunite with family members who had been given asylum. Many would have to wait 2 years before they could join each other. It proved too much. Rutte's VVD party and the Christian Democrat Appeal Party backed the tough measures. Their coalition partners, the centre-left D66 and Christian Union, opposed them, saying they were not willing to break up families. The reason this became such a hot-button issue is in the numbers. Asylum applications in the Netherlands jumped by a third last year to over 46,000 and are expected to increase to more than 70,000 this year, the highest on record. Can the next government find a solution?
So joining us to discuss this, we've got from Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Joram van Klaveren, who is a former Dutch politician and founder of the Islam Experience Center. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, we have Sietske Bergsma, who's a lawyer and a publicist. And in Guelph, in Canada, we have Associate Professor Edward Koenig from the Department of Political Science at the University of Guelph. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Joram, I'm going to start with you, if I may. So, as far as you're concerned, what are the reasons behind the collapse of the Dutch government? Because if we went to the newspapers, it's asylum seekers and that's it. Do you think that's the reason they fell?
No, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. No, of course, it has to do with asylum seekers and immigration. But there's much more. There are a lot of crises here in the Netherlands, in the EU, I think. One of them is asylum seekers, immigration, but the other one has to do with the nitrogen crisis, the farmer crisis, as they call it here. There are a lot of problems with trusting the government not trusting the people. Housing is a big problem here. Energy is a big problem here. Of course, there's a war going on. So there are a lot of problems here. And it's like the accumulation of all these things that made the government collapse.
Now, as the government collapsed, obviously, there was this split. Mark Rutte came out and he said, we're going to have a new election. And everyone thought, maybe he's pulling a similar stunt to the one that's recently been pulled in Spain. And then he sort of stepped aside and said he's leaving politics. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that was a big surprise for everybody here. But in the end, I think most of the parties in the coalition, and it was a left-wing Christian organization. We had the Liberal Party that is, funny enough, a right-wing party here in the Netherlands. Then we had the Christian Democrats and the Social Liberals. And those parties were disagreeing on a lot of topics, the topics I just called. And the thing is that I think they already knew it was about to collapse. And for the Liberal Party, immigration and asylum seeker was the best topic to collapse because they can go into elections with this topic. And that's the topic that they think they are probably going to win, or at least I think they will think that they were going to win on this topic.
Sietske, what do you make of it? Do you think that they've dropped the government or collapsed the government at this time so they can use immigration in the run-up to the next election? There does seem to be, since the rise of the BBB, and as Joram was saying, this nitrogen crisis and farmer row that's happening in the Netherlands, there does seem to have been a push in that direction.
Yes, definitely. I think I agree with Joram about the background issues that are playing in the Netherlands currently. The public mood is that of Rutte fatigue, I would say. A lot of people are really tired of 13 years of his leadership. crisis after crisis. I would say, however, that this crisis, this immigration policy crisis that has led to the collapse of the government, the coalition, feels a lot like it's staged, or at least forced. It's no secret that Mark Rutte has shifted positions on immigration policies. He was against it, let's say 10 years ago, but he has moved more to the left, just like Merkel has done in Germany. And I think he really followed her line of "Wir schaffen das." We'll manage it. We can take in these people. And we have seen that they are sleeping on the streets. We have had more than 400,000 immigrants just last year. And he has realized that he cannot sell this anymore to the Dutch public. So I think that's the reason why he chose this crisis to end his political career in the Netherlands, which is interesting because I don't believe he will leave the political stage internationally, but he will, I believe, leave the Netherlands, the politics in the Netherlands, yes.
Edward, Sietke's mentioned there that she felt that this sort of immigration row looked a little bit staged. There are plenty of commentators on the situation who've made that reference. Do you feel it looked a little bit staged?
I would definitely say it felt a little constructed and forced, right? Like there was an issue that had, as Joram and Sietke were both saying, divided the coalition before, but the sense of urgency to strike a deal on this asylum arrangement that Rutte wanted to push through came as a bit of a surprise. So suddenly he was claiming that we needed a vote in the Council of Ministers, which is sort of like the cabinet in Dutch politics. And that's basically in a coalition government, or at least in the Dutch tradition, saying either you're with me or we have to stop with this coalition. So it did seem to come a little bit out of the blue. We knew that the VVD and in particular the Christian Union and the social liberals, as Joram was explaining, didn't see eye to eye on migration, but that this would lead to a collapse of the government on that specific issue came as a bit of a surprise, at least to me.
What do you think it'll mean, Edward, for the voters as they look to this election? It's not that far out. They don't have a lot of time to make a choice. Are they just going to scrabble and just go, I'll stick with a safe pair of hands? What happens? Because if it's anything like the last election you had in the Netherlands, suddenly BBB, the Farmers' Party, is going to come out of nowhere and come all the way to the top.
Well, so that's the really confusing part about this, at least to me, is that, the cynic in me says that whenever a prime minister or a government leader tries to force new elections, that's because they're doing well in the polls. And that's not the case right now. If you look at the latest polls, the VVD would lose about 14 out of 150 seats that we have in parliament. So that's a really big chunk. It would no longer be the largest party in parliament, but actually, as you refer to, the BBB would. So it would go from the current 1 to a projection of about 26, thereby becoming the largest party in parliament. Now, of course, there's a lot of time between now and new elections, so who knows how this campaign plays out. But I don't think that we would end up where we were last time around. I mean, as you will recall, last time around, the coalition formation was difficult because an unpopular government fell over a scandal. And then there was not really any possibility to form a different coalition than the coalition that nobody really wanted. And so now we're going to have an election where basically every opposition party, I would expect, will do better than the 4 parties that were in this current coalition.
Let me take this across to Joram. Joram, what do you make of what's going to come out of this next election? Are you anticipating a right-wing government? You seem to indicate that that's what the polls look like.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if there will be a right-wing government. I think there will be a minority government because it's very hard nowadays to find a majority with left-wing, right-wing parties only, and even with a mixed group of parties. Because when you look at the polls, it's just like has been said before, The Triple B party or the BBB party will be, if you look at the polls, the biggest, the largest one. Then the Liberal Party of the Prime Minister, who just left, will be the second one. And then there are a lot of different organizations who are very close to each other. We have the Freedom Party, so to say, the right-wing party. Then we have a Green Left, and that's a very left-wing party. We have the Labour Party, and they're all like between 10 and 15. And it makes it very hard. So I think in the end, there will be a minority government. But there's one thing that is very remarkable. There's this guy, is a very independent politician. He really is an independent right now because he left the Christian Democratic organization, the CDA. And his name is Omtzigt. And there are also polls that asked the people, what if this guy will run with his own party? And then, remarkably enough, he will be the biggest party. So it's kind of diffuse right now.
Now, this is a very strange state of affairs. If I bring up some of Mark Rutte's proposals that he put through in this immigration bill that caused quite so many rows, he said he wanted temporary asylum for people fleeing conflicts. You wouldn't have thought that that was enormously controversial. Permanent asylum for people escaping persecution. Again, you know, that's within sort of EU limits on the kinds of things that there are. Limit on the number of family members allowed to join asylum seekers, and a 2-year waiting period for family members. And it seems to be the last two that upset the Christian party, Joram, and that's what caused the government collapse? Or am I mistaken here as an outsider?
No. I think that's correct. But the whole thing is it really has to do with the European Union as well, because the social democratic, the social liberals, the D66 as they call them here, and the Christian Union, they're both kind of leftish. And the CDA and the VVD, they're both more right wing. And all four of them are very pro EU. But in the end, when it comes to asylum seekers, immigration, when you look at CU, the Christian Union, and D66, they're more like constitutional when it comes to the whole concept of the EU. They say, well, the EU law tells us, European law tells us we have to apply such and such law, we have to do this and this. And they're very open when it comes to borders. They're very liberal when it comes to immigration. Because the VVD, at least that's what they say, they said, well, we are trying to change the law and make it more strict, more conservative when it comes to immigration. That's where where it's becoming difficult for them, because one side of the coalition was pro-EU, more open border, and the other one said, well, we have to be more conservative, but they can't because they're in the European Union. So that's another level that's added to this discussion about immigration in Europe, and especially in the Netherlands.
Sietske, I mean, immigration has been a key controversial issue in Holland for several decades now. We could go all the way back to List Pim Fortuyn, which suddenly exploded up onto the scene over the immigration issue. So do you think this next election, if it comes through, can get a coalition together with a single voice on that one very contentious topic?
Well, that all depends on whether, like Joram said, they can agree at least on the fact that Brussels is dictating most of the immigration policies in the Netherlands. It is not a domestic issue. We could see that Mark Rutte did not have any sovereignty and actual power to change anything about the deals that he, or at least other European leaders have made with each other about sharing the burden of all the fugitives that are coming into Europe. So they have no choice, I think, to continue on this route, which is very destructive, because we are a country of 17 million people, and the amount of people coming in right now, almost 500,000 last year, like I just said, is unsustainable. We have a housing crisis. No more houses have been built because of the nitrogen and climate crisis, which has also been staged, is my opinion. But the problems are just growing and growing, and the immigration policy will, however, be a very important election topic for most Dutch people. So they have to at least try to convince the public that they they can actually take control over the policies. But well, we'll have to see. I think they have another 4 months to campaign. What has not been said today here is that other political leaders of the coalition parties have also left the stage. It's not just Rutte that has left, but also Sigrid Kaag has left. And Wopke Hoekstra, the leader of the CDA party. Only the leader of the Christian Union has stayed. So the cards are completely open. Like, who is going to take charge of all these parties? I think it's very difficult to predict what will happen during the next elections in November.
Edward, I've got a clip here from Mark Rutte when he was talking about the reasons for the government falling. Here's what he had to say.
Het is geen geheim dat.
It's no secret that the coalition partners have differing opinions about immigration policy. Today we have unfortunately had to conclude that these differences have become insurmountable. Therefore, in writing, I will tender the resignation of the entire cabinet to the king.
Direct hierna schriftelijk het ontslag.
Edward, following on from what the others have been saying, is there sort of a messiah-like figure that you can see in Dutch politics who might come in and sort of rally around and build up a coalition? Because at the moment, all of your top-level politicians seem to be running for the exit, stage left.
Yeah, it's a very unclear future for Dutch politics, that's for sure. I'm not usually the kind of person who would use the term messiah for politicians. I'm a little bit of a
An Obama-like figure, somebody who can rally people around them.
What I would say about some of the previous contributions, though, is that I think and it's also sort of in response to your question, is that politics on immigration in the Netherlands is very much one where there is a large political risk for politicians to make a humanitarian pitch, and at the risk of being called naive or maybe even woke today, and that there's basically a widespread sense among at least the center and center right, and even a little bit of the center left, that to be tough on immigration is electorally rewarding. And so Sietske is absolutely right that there is limits, and Joram made allusions to that as well, that there are limits to what politicians can do on immigration, but to a large extent they don't really care. In my reading, what they mostly want to do is they want to posture about making restrictive changes, even if they're not actually feasible to implement. And I would also say that part of this type of politics is a very alarmist tone on immigration. And so I take a little bit of a different view from what Sietske was just saying, is that it's undeniably the case that the Netherlands is struggling with offering proper accommodation to asylum seekers. But the notion that it's impossible to offer a decent welcome, I don't particularly buy. It's a matter of political will, right? Like Rutte doesn't do anything, and then he says, "See, it's a very difficult problem to address." It's like, yeah, well, then you need to put in resources to try to increase your ability to accommodate asylum seekers. I think in these debates it's also very important to distinguish.
Is he not hamstrung on that front though? Sietske mentioned here the nitrogen laws that have all come in, and the nitrogen rules that have come in the Netherlands. Now, I know that's impacted the farmers pretty heavily. That's why BBB is suddenly rocketed up in the polls. But prior to the farmers, it was also affecting the building sector. So if you can't build more infrastructure and you can't build more homes and more hotels, and you've also got an issue with your farmers as well. For most economies, if we were to look back over the last 25 years in Europe, these are not electoral issues. Electoral issues are normally defense, education, government spending, inflation, the economy. These seem like much smaller issues than we'd normally deal with, Edward.
I don't know if housing, migration, climate are unusual election topics these days. I think they're pretty prominent in many Western democracies. It's true that, like political scientists tend to refer to these as sort of like post-materialist debates about not so much about law and order or material well-being, but rather about human rights or the future of the planet or reactions to those kinds of concerns. I think if you follow many election campaigns, I mean, the last one in Canada where I am was also very heavily on at least, well, exactly on two of those topics. The housing issue wasn't as prominent, but that's mostly because it's a provincial responsibility, and the provincial elections feature heavy discussions on those issues. So,
well, let me bring this across to Joram. Joram, what do you make of the fact that the electoral topics in the Netherlands seem to be issues that 10 or 15 or 20 years ago wouldn't have been regarded as sort of right at the forefront of people's minds? Right now, defence, for instance, it's fairly easy to see a reason why defence might be at the top of people's minds. It just isn't there.
No, that's true. No, well, when you look at immigration, immigration has been a topic for the last 2 decades, I think. Yeah, you just mentioned Lijst Pim Fortuyn. He was, of course, he was a rising star because of the topic of immigration. So that was already a big topic. Then, of course, when it comes to security and safety, not only domestic, but also when it has to do with for example, Russia, Ukraine right now. But that's not a real topic. Of course, it wasn't back then. But here in the Netherlands, most of the political parties, they're in favor of supporting Ukraine. So that's not a real issue there. Most of them say, well, we have to support Ukraine. There are only 1 or 2 parties who are more, let's say, have some critique on the current policies. So no, immigration has been a topic. Housing hasn't been a topic like it's now, but it has to do, of course, it has to do with the nitrogen crisis as well, and with immigration. But what's very important is that we have to make a cut when it comes to immigration. We have asylum seekers. That's the first group. And then there is the rest, what they call regular immigration. And regular immigration are people applying for a visa to work here, family reunification, etc. And then there is asylum seekers. So when you look at the policies, the official policies, there's this cut. And when it comes to people coming to the Netherlands, for example, it was just mentioned 400,000 last year. That is true, but that they're not all asylum seekers. They're not all asylum seekers. So it is possible to arrange something. It's not impossible, of course, but it has to do with the whole concept of immigration as well, because there are a lot of people here coming who aren't refugees, of course, but they're still looking for a house, they're looking for jobs, they're looking for everything. And there is a shortage, especially when it comes to housing. So it is a real topic, and it has to do, I think, with the current crisis on several issues here in the EU, but especially in the Netherlands, because we are, in the end, a very small country with a lot of people.
Now, Joram's just mentioned the number of asylum seekers relative to the amount of overall immigration there, Siska. Asylum applications into the Netherlands in 2022 were in the region of around 46,000. This year, 2023, it's estimated those will be about 70,000, still a relatively small proportion of overall immigration. Siska, what are you anticipating will come out of this election, given that it's only just a few weeks away? Surely we should be in the middle of the election season rather than just thrown right into it and still at the start.
Well, not just a few weeks. It's going to be in November. The elections will be in November, so that is after the summer. They are taking their time to form new coalitions after that. So I predict that Rutte will probably not leave until, I would say, the spring of 2024. I think that's realistic. So he has like at least 9 months. I think he even said that to Erdogan at the table where he was this week to discuss the war in Ukraine. He mentioned 9 months. So he has 9 months to find another job. He has even said that he wanted to be a teacher again, I think. I don't think he's going to do that. But like I said, I think it's very uncertain what's going to happen. I do think that immigration is a topic that is interconnected with all the other issues of our time right now. Like I just mentioned, the housing crisis, but it's also that the people have lost trust in their governments. I think that has not been said clearly enough today. I think this is what they fear most from the electorate. I think they are uncertain what the people are going to do. They have already voiced their concerns about the mainstream parties. They do not like the current centrist parties, D66. They have chosen, in March, they have all voted, many people have voted for the Farmer Citizens Party. I think that trend will continue on into the near future. So yes, I think that people will vote more to the right. But yeah, again, the left parties might even have a fusion. They will work together. I mean, I think it's all up in the air at this point.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you, for joining me today. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. But remember, you can see more discussion and debate if you head on over to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me here and the entire team, thank you for watching and goodbye.